In history, there are moments that challenge shallow assumptions and remind humanity of timeless truths. One such truth in the teachings of the Ahl-al-Bayt is this: honor does not come from color, status, or appearance. It comes from righteousness, knowledge, and service to God. Often, people forget that beauty in the eyes of Allah is not found in complexion, but in the purity of the heart. Faith is not measured by the shade of one's skin, but by the light that radiates from one's soul. Some of our noble leaders, chosen guides of this ummah, came from mothers of diverse backgrounds, including African heritage. Their complexion was a divine reminder that leadership in Islam transcends race and tribe, that divine brilliance shines through any skin tone. Spiritual leadership in Islam is rooted not in outward forms, not in what the eyes perceive, but in the depth of piety and the purity of one's inner world. When we reflect on the teachings of the Ahl-al-Bayt, we find a consistent message. True honor belongs to those whom Allah purifies, those who embody taqwa, wisdom, humility, and service. Worldly standards change from era to era, but divine standards remain eternal. A society may value lineage, appearance, status, or wealth, but the path taught by the noble household was to seek the elevation of the heart rather than the elevation of the face. Consider how many times history has witnessed individuals of noble birth who lacked noble character, or those adorned in splendor but hollow in spirit. In contrast, those guided by Allah carry a dignity that no worldly title can fabricate and no prejudice can diminish. This is why, when discussing spiritual leadership, the teachings of the Ahl-al-Bayt guide us away from superficiality and toward substance, away from external measurement and toward internal reality. The Quran itself reminds humanity that the most honored in the sight of God is the most righteous. This criterion strips away illusions of superiority based on race, wealth, tribe, or physique. It commands believers to evaluate themselves not by appearance, but by sincerity, obedience, patience, and moral excellence. When a believer looks at themselves or others through this divine lens, arrogance cannot survive and prejudice cannot thrive. Within the legacy of the Ahl-al-Bayt, we find leaders who inherited greatness not through titles, but through spiritual depth, self-sacrifice, unwavering devotion, and a profound connection with the divine. Even when faced with adversity, even when surrounded by those who judged by worldly standards, they stood as an example that true leadership is not handed by society. It is affirmed by God. Their presence transformed hearts. Their words awakened minds, and their character illuminated darkness. Whether they came from noble Arab lineage or from mothers of diverse origins, their worth did not fluctuate, for Allah Himself had purified them. When some people, in ignorance or arrogance, tried to view leadership through the narrow lens of lineage or physical features, the Ahl-al-Bayt shattered such illusions by standing as living proof that divine selection has nothing to do with complexion and everything to do with purity, knowledge, and sacrifice. Their teachings instructed believers, do not judge by what the eye sees, for the eye may be deceived. Judge by what the heart perceives, for righteousness leaves a fragrance that truth seekers can always recognize. Think of the moments when the Imam stood with the enslaved, ate with the poor, elevated the marginalized, and taught that a servant who fears Allah may surpass a king who obeys his desires. Their lives taught us that guidance is not chained to skin tone, and spiritual greatness is not measured in social rank. Instead, greatness lies in worship that softens the heart, patience that strengthens the soul, humility that dissolves pride, and knowledge that uplifts humanity. This is why we must internalize their approach and recognize that leadership rooted in divine wisdom transcends earthly boundaries. When we understand this, we understand why Islam is universal, why truth belongs to no tribe, and why the light of guidance shines upon whom Allah wills. To follow the Ahl-al-Bayt is to reject prejudice, to break inherited bias, to cleanse the heart of arrogance, and to honor those whom God honors. It means learning to see with spiritual vision rather than worldly sight. Whoever embodies taqwa becomes noble. Whoever embodies sincerity becomes honorable. Whoever submits to God becomes elevated. This is the essence of leadership in the way of the Ahl-al-Bayt, and it is this essence that every believer must strive to embody and uphold. Teachings of the Ahl-al-Bayt make it clear that Islam came to break the chains of arrogance and dismantle the walls of discrimination. There is no superiority of one race over another, no privilege granted by color, no rank bestowed by tribe, and no higher station earned through physical appearance. The only true measure of a believer is the level of their faith, their character, and their sincerity before Allah. When the Ahl-al-Bayt taught equality, they did not merely speak of it as a theory. They lived it, breathed it, practiced it in every interaction, and demanded it from their followers. They reminded humanity that we all originate from one Creator, and will all stand before Him on the same ground, judged not by our skin or our lineage, but by our deeds and intentions. One of the most powerful lessons they showed was how to honor every soul. They sat with the poor, welcomed the outsider, shared meals with the downtrodden, and elevated those whom society overlooked. They taught that the worth of a person lies not in what the world sees, but in how sincerely they stand in front of their Lord. In their gatherings, a scholar and a freed slave could sit side by side without one feeling greater than the other, because dignity in their presence was tied only to piety, not to worldly labels. There were those who tried to enforce social hierarchies, who believed heritage or appearance granted superiority, yet the Ahl-al-Bayt challenged such thinking by honoring people of every background and reminding society that arrogance over race is ignorance and pride over skin is blindness. They made it known that a heart filled with prejudice is a heart veiled from divine light. To belittle someone over their color is not only a betrayal of Islamic teaching, but a rebellion against the very justice of God, who created humanity in diverse shades as a sign, not as a basis for division. When they spoke, they reminded their followers that piety beautifies a person in ways the eye cannot measure, and sin darkens the soul in ways the skin could never reflect. There were companions and loyal students of the Ahl-al-Bayt who came from African heritage, and their proximity, love, and status among the household was a living proof that spiritual rank is gifted to hearts that are sincere, regardless of where those hearts were born or the tone of the skin that protects them. These lessons are timeless and necessary today more than ever, because humanity still struggles with judging by the surface rather than the substance. Even within communities that claim spirituality, bias lingers in subtle glances, quiet comments, and hidden attitudes. Yet to follow the Ahl-al-Bayt genuinely is to uproot such attitudes from our souls, to purify our thinking, and to see believers as brothers and sisters equal in creation and equal in worth. If someone's heart carries racism or prejudice, they have not understood the spirit of the Prophet's household. If someone elevates a person due to race and overlooks another due to skin tone, then they are measuring with the scale of ignorance, not faith. Equality in Islam is not a slogan. It is a spiritual law, a moral duty, and a path to divine pleasure. To truly follow the Ahl-al-Bayt is to love those Allah loves and respect those whom He dignifies, no matter what their external form may be. It means shaking hands with people of every background with the same warmth, praying beside them with the same humility, and valuing every believer with the same respect. The more we internalize their teachings, the more we realize that racism is not simply a social sin. It is a spiritual poison that distances a person from God. When the heart learns to see beyond skin and look into essence, beyond features and into faith, beyond difference and into divine unity, then one begins to reflect the character of those noble guides. Let us strive to practice the equality they taught, to soften our hearts toward every soul, and to elevate our perspective from shallow judgment to divine understanding. For only then do we truly walk on the path illuminated by their light. True faith is a light that lives in the heart, not a feature worn on the face, nor a color painted on the skin, nor a status printed on paper. The Ahl-al-Bayt taught that the true measurement of a believer lies in character, in the way one stands before Allah in humility, and in the way one treats His creation with compassion. They reminded us that a person's lineage, wealth, or physical traits are insignificant in the sight of the Almighty if their heart lacks sincerity, obedience, and moral discipline. Faith is not found in how loudly a person speaks of religion, but in how quietly they practice it when no one is watching. It is not announced through grand gestures for praise, but nourished through simple acts done for Allah alone. A believer may be unknown among people but celebrated by the angels, and another may be famous in the world yet hidden in darkness before the heavens. This is because Allah looks at the heart and the deeds, not at the body or the social label attached to it. The Ahl-al-Bayt constantly turned people's attention inward, urging them to purify their intentions and build their inner world. They taught that the soul is like a garden. If nourished by remembrance, humility, and truthfulness, it flourishes. But if polluted by arrogance, envy, and superficial pride, it withers. Faith is not proven by the garments one wears or the tone of one's skin, but by sincerity in prayer, honesty in speech, patience in adversity, gratitude in ease, and mercy towards others. Even someone who speaks little but carries sincerity in every breath is closer to Allah than one who performs outward acts only to receive praise. They reminded us that some hearts, though hidden behind humble appearances, shine more beautifully than the most decorated faces, and that Allah elevates those who purify their souls even if the world overlooks them. In the teachings of the Ahl-al-Bayt, arrogance over physical traits is a sign of spiritual blindness. A person who feels superior because of skin color or features has already weakened their faith, for faith teaches humility, love, and equality. True believers never judge by appearance. They look for truth, for good manners, for sincerity, and for fear of Allah. They understand that what is external will return to dust, but what is internal will face eternity. Wealth fades, beauty ages, titles lose value, and bodies decay. Only the heart's purity remains. Thus, the believer invests not in ornamentation of the body, but in the refinement of the soul, because that is what will accompany them on the day of judgment. The one who prays sincerely, forgives quickly, gives quietly, and loves sincerely for the sake of Allah has achieved a greatness no worldly rank can match. The Ahl-al-Bayt taught us to look toward qualities like patience, humility, honesty, and devotion when evaluating a person. They showed us through their companions and students that even the humblest of people can be closer to God than kings and commanders. They embraced the poor, honored freed slaves, respected seekers of knowledge, and cherished those with sincere hearts. Their gatherings were filled with individuals from different lands, different skin tones, different accents, and different histories, all united by faith, not by appearance. They did not ask where someone came from. They asked where their heart was going. They did not value someone for their physical features. They valued them for their sincerity, their effort, and their closeness to Allah. This is the standard a believer must adopt. If we judge by appearance, we judge like those ruled by their ego. But if we judge by character and by faith, then we reflect the light of divine guidance. When a person focuses on inner growth, they recognize that every soul is honored by creation, and every complexion is a sign of Allah's artistry. They learn to polish their heart instead of obsessing over their image, to purify their intentions rather than their reputation, and to seek Allah's approval rather than people's applause. True faith is not seen in how one looks, but in how one prays, how one forgives, how one avoids harming others, and how one strives each day to be more sincere, more patient, and more grateful. Only then does faith settle in the heart and shine through actions, making the believer beautiful in the eyes of the Creator, regardless of how the world sees them. The legacy of the Ahl-al-Bayt teaches us that standing against prejudice, uplifting the oppressed, and embodying moral excellence is not optional for a believer. It is a sacred duty. Their lives were living sermons, demonstrating that truth must be defended even when it is unpopular, justice must be upheld even when it is difficult, and dignity must be extended to all people, regardless of their background or appearance. They lived in societies where tribal superiority, lineage pride, and racial arrogance often influenced people's attitudes, yet they shattered these false hierarchies with grace, wisdom, and firmness. Their doors remained open to the marginalized, their hearts embraced the overlooked, and their teachings uplifted the forgotten. They taught that no heart filled with arrogance can claim to walk the path of divine guidance, and no community that tolerates discrimination can claim to be following the light of the Prophet's household. To belittle someone due to their skin color or social status is not only a moral crime, but a spiritual betrayal of the values they taught. The Ahl-al-Bayt responded to prejudice not with silence, but with action. They spoke against racism in sermons, corrected bias in their followers, defended those wronged by society, and elevated sincere believers regardless of heritage. Their companions came from diverse backgrounds, Arab and non-Arab, noble-born and freed slaves, light-skinned and dark-skinned, yet they stood shoulder to shoulder, united by faith. They taught that true companionship lies not in shared ethnicity, but in shared righteousness. When they uplifted the oppressed, they did so not with pity, but with honor, empowering them with knowledge, trust, and respect. They did not simply include people of different backgrounds. They celebrated them, trusted them, and valued them as pillars of the community. They did not tolerate casual prejudice or subtle discrimination. They confronted it directly and purified hearts through wisdom and guidance. Following their example means that believers today must challenge prejudice wherever they see it, in homes, communities, workspaces, or hearts. It means teaching children that every shade of human skin is a masterpiece of Allah, every believer is a brother or sister, and every soul deserves respect. It also means recognizing our own weaknesses, examining our hearts for hidden bias, and purifying our perspective. It is easy to say we believe in equality. It is harder to practice it consistently. True devotion demands that we change not only our speech but our behavior, greeting others warmly, welcoming diversity into our spaces. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on these teachings, we are reminded that the path of the Ahl-al-Bayt is a path of purity, justice, humility, and unwavering spiritual insight. Their legacy calls us to rise above shallow judgments, to reject every form of prejudice, and to honor the divine dignity placed within every soul. They showed us that true leadership is born in the heart, that faith is measured by sincerity and character, and that skin color, lineage, and worldly status hold no value in the sight of Allah when compared to taqwa and truthfulness. They taught us that a believer does not see through the eyes of the ego, but through the light of faith. A believer does not walk with arrogance, but with humility. A believer does not divide people by race, wealth, or background, but unites humanity under the banner of God's mercy and justice. The Imam stood with the oppressed, uplifted the forgotten, embraced diversity, and shattered ignorance with knowledge and compassion. So let this message settle deeply in our hearts. Honor lies in righteousness, not appearance. Greatness lies in service, not pride. And true beauty lies in the soul, not the skin. When we treat every person with respect, when we cleanse our hearts from arrogance, when we see others through the lens of divine dignity, we not only honor their legacy, we transform ourselves. May Allah allow us to embody their teachings, soften our hearts, purify our intentions, and walk with the grace and wisdom of those who carried the light of guidance. May He make us defenders of justice, protectors of dignity, and torchbearers of compassion. And may our character reflect the noble values of the Ahl-al-Bayt, so that our actions speak louder than our words, and our hearts shine brighter than our outward form.